Good morning. The gospel reading this morning comes from Luke 20:27 through 38. The Sadducees, who do not believe in the resurrection of the dead, tried to trap Jesus. They formulate the convoluted case of a serial widow who marries a succession of 7 brothers. Jesus responds by teaching about God, to whom all are alive and in whom all relationships are fulfilled. Some Sadducees, those who say there is no resurrection, came to Jesus and asked him a question. Teacher, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies, leaving a wife but no children, the man shall marry the widow and raise up children for his brother. Now, there were 7 brothers. The first married and died childless. Then the second and the third married her, and so in the same way, all 7 died childless. Finally, the woman also died. In the resurrection, therefore, whose wife will the woman be? For 7 had married her. Jesus said to them, those who belong to this age marry and are given in marriage. But those who are considered worthy of a place in that age and in the resurrection from the dead neither marry nor are given in marriage. Indeed, they cannot die anymore, because they are like angels and are children of God, being children of the resurrection. And the fact that the dead are raised, Moses himself showed in the story about the bush, where he speaks of the Lord as the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Now he is God not of the dead, but of the living, for to him all of them are alive. You may be seated. Well, this is new for you. I've done it before on a couple of different occasions, but never here, and never did this many. Anyway, I was asked by Pastor to do a sermon today. I did not have to follow the scriptures, which I am not. That gospel reading would be a little bit tough. So I am going off on something. It's sort of like a faith story with me, and it's entitled Buffaloes and Blue Kitchens. It's a little strange, but you will find out why. I have some scripture readings from some from the gospel that I am going to start with. The first one is Luke 11:9 through 10. And I tell you, many of you know this one, ask and it will be given you, seek and you will find, and knock and it will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be opened. John 14:13 and 14. Whatever you ask in my name, I will do it, that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If you ask anything in my name, I will do it. 1 John 5:14 and 15. And this is the confidence which we have in him, that if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. And if we know that he hears us in whatever we ask, we know that we have obtained the requests made of him. Psalms 37:4, take delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Back in the 1980s, there was a pharmaceutical commercial, and I can't remember all the verses, and because Don would prefer, I won't sing them either. But a couple of the verses that I did recall, it's talking about, it's not that unusual that everything is beautiful. It's just another ordinary miracle today. No need to teach a seed to grow or tell the sky it's time to snow. It's just another ordinary miracle today. There are miracles everywhere, every day. But how often do we take the time to really appreciate them or even notice them, especially the ordinary miracles? My talk this morning will focus on a certain time in my life when a series of events happened that helped determine the course I was to take. Were they earth-shaking? No. Did they make the 6 o'clock news? No, not in Alaska, they didn't. Miracles, you ask? Probably not. Some say coincidences or even just good luck. No way. They were profound for me. God's plan for me at work? Absolutely. First, some background on me so you have an idea of where you're coming from. I was born and raised in rural North Dakota. I was from the Red River Valley farmland, and life for us consisted of work on the farm, picking rocks. Ooh, that was exciting. Oh, we thought our dad, my brother and I thought our dad planted rocks just so we'd have something to do. They were, every time we picked them up, there they were back again the next year. School and boys' sports. And I'll say boys' sports because that's all there were back in my area of North Dakota. In fact, as a junior, I went to the superintendent and I had a piece of paper with signatures on it saying, we want some girls' sports, and could we please at least start with cross-country running? We don't have to be in their way. We'll follow them on the golf course and run around and just enter something. And the superintendent patted me on the head, and he said, oh, Noreen, he said, that wouldn't be very feminine, would it? He said, you can be a cheerleader. So that was boys' sports back in the day. And then there was music, and music is where I devoted my time. And then, like most small communities, the church was the center of everything. In my little town, there were two churches, the Lutheran church and the Presbyterian church. And then the church I went to was a tiny little church out in the country. Church was non-negotiable. You never asked to skip. You just didn't. It would never have crossed your mind. My parents were church treasurers for over 30 years. I was the church organist in the little country church when I was in 8th grade. They were really desperate. I would play for the 8 a.m. service, and then I would jump in the car with our pastor and head to town, the town church, that was a little bit bigger, for the 9:30 service, and I would sing in their choir and then go to Sunday school. I did that every Sunday until our little country church closed. We had a very active Luther League. Anybody in here remember Luther League? Did you all? Yeah, that was big time back then. In a town of 100 to 125 people, now there's only about 50 in that little town. By the way, I was in the largest graduating class to ever graduate from Sharon, North Dakota. There was 13 of us. That was a big class, yes. Anyway, there were about 30 kids in Luther League in our little church. As a senior, I was one of several delegates from North Dakota to attend the National Luther League Convention in New York City, Madison Square Gardens. Big time. You should have seen us little North Dakota people in New York on the subway, scared to death. That's a whole nother story. It was an awesome experience, and Luther League was a great big deal growing up. Ladies of the community always predicted I'd be a pastor's wife someday. I'd laugh. That was a nice thought, but I had other plans. I was going out west to college, and I was going to marry a rancher and have horses and cattle. But my daddy had other plans, and I had to choose an in-state college. It's hard to find a rancher in farmland, USA. And then along came Roger Steinbrecker from Princeton, Minnesota. He chose a college out of state. He chose the one in North Dakota that I went to. We met, and the idea of marrying a rancher flew right out the window. We ended up with teaching degrees and eventually got married, and I really can't imagine a better career choice for me than teaching. I used it for 23 years. Back then, by the way, you might remember, the girls usually had about 3 career options: teaching, nursing, or secretary. I was a teacher. I taught in North Dakota for a year, and then after we were married, we taught for 2 years in southern Minnesota, Clinton, Minnesota. But all those years, Alaska was on my mental list of places. I just needed to go, and I needed to see it. I had to experience Alaska. And if you've ever been there, you kind of have an idea. It kind of gets to you. As luck would have it, we moved to the Aleutian Islands in 1977, and we taught there. We taught out, our plan was to go there for 2 years. We'll go to Alaska for 2 years and then come back to Minnesota. But we practically set a teaching record out in the Aleutians. We taught in that little bitty island. It was just a little 8 by 10 mile island. and 650 miles out towards Japan, out on the Aleutians, way out there. And we taught out there for 13 years. It took a year to get used to it, but boy, was it a great place with wonderful people. And they're lifelong friends, and many have flown down here to visit in Deerwood, and they kind of stay in touch. An interesting side note, back in the 1930s, somebody, and I don't know who, some people back then, brought out a herd of buffalo. A small herd, just a little herd, and they deposited them on the other side of the island, this little 8 by 10 mile island with huge mountains separating the two sides, and they put the buffalo on the other side of the island. And it grew to be kind of a pretty good herd of 30 to 40 buffalo over there. I never got to see them, however. They were always on the other side. Also, Alaska is full of volcanoes and earthquakes. Alaska is known as the land of 10,000 volcanoes and 30,000 lakes. So it's a big state, huge state. Earthquakes and volcanoes were a big interest to me when I was a little kid. I always just loved studying about them. And now I had 4 volcanoes that I could see from my house. Mount Pavlov and the Twin Sisters, and then Mount Veniaminoff on the other side. So, and 2 of them were very active. In fact, I have a container of volcano ash, if anybody wants to see it and feel it. It's back there. And that comes later on in the story. But like since the '64 earthquake and all that, that was a really big deal for me. But after teaching out there for 13 years and having 2 kids, it was time to think about moving on. Some of our reasons were hazardous flying. Aleutians are known for some of the absolute worst weather in the world. It's nothing to have winds going through the tundra at 118, 120 miles an hour. You just hang on to your kids and hope that you get where you're going and don't let your door break off. You know, those are just things you had to worry about. Our kids were getting older. There was a different lifestyle out there, and it was time to start getting back to what we were used to. Randy, our oldest, she's been begging for a horse since she was 5 years old. Please, Daddy, I need a horse. I want a horse. I want a horse. And we always said, oh, sweetie, you know, not out here. It's not going to work. But maybe when you're 10 years old or could lift a bale of hay, we'll get you a horse. Well, what were we thinking? I had to get out of music. I had laser throat surgery on my voice from overuse of my voice teaching kindergarten, first grade, band, beginners band, and choir, and had just abused it more and more, and had to have laser surgery. The doctor said, you're done, no more. In fact, I was supposed to teach my class talking like this all the time. Doesn't work. I really miss being part of a Lutheran church. All we had out there was a Russian Orthodox church that met maybe twice a year, and a Baptist mission church. I got active in the Baptist mission church, but it just wasn't the same as what I grew up with. So we started looking. We were picky, and we had time on our side. We focused on Ketchikan, Valdez, and the Kenai Peninsula. And those of you that have ever been on a cruise ship have been to Ketchikan and things like that. It's a pretty cool place. The Kenai Peninsula was practically impossible to get into. I had a good friend who was then teaching at Cooper Landing. It's close to where Greg and Diane live now. And she had told us a lot about the openings on the Kenai Peninsula due to early retirement buyouts. Ooh. There was going to be a huge job fair in Soldotna by invitation only. So we took a chance. We sent in our applications as a package deal. And let's see, as a package deal. And our friend who was the high school principal in Seward said, you're never going to get in. You can't go as a package deal because there are no elementary openings in Seward. There never are. So you won't get in on that one. But anyway, lo and behold, we had to do it anyway because we would be taking large pay cuts leaving the island and going onto the mainland. So we did it, and lo and behold, we were invited to attend the job fair. Now we were really scared. We were really worried what's going to happen with our lives. Mount Redoubt, which is the volcano that Greg can see from his living room, from his place, decided to erupt right during the week of Easter that we were going to fly in for these interviews. And it did quite an eruption, sent volcanic ash, which is the ash that I have back there. And it cleared enough so that our flight was able to get in, and we got to our interviews. And that ash was all over the school parking lots about that deep. And we were scooping it up, and anyway, had it to keep forever. And let's see, now we were really worried. Now we're there, and it's been 13 years since we had ever gone through interviewing processes. Would anybody want us? We were pretty high on the experience chart. My husband had 15 years, I had 16. And as soon as we arrived in Soldotna, we found out that Seward was taking on a new first grade teacher. There was an elementary opening in Seward. Never happens. A couple of weeks later, we were both offered, I immediately signed up for the interview. We were both offered jobs in Seward, and we accepted. And now we were really worried. Fear of the unknown. What have we done? How can we leave this beautiful island? How can we leave our friends? What were we thinking? We sat down and we told the kids that we were planning to move because we had new job offers, and that we had to start thinking about packing and what to keep and what to give away. Lisa, our youngest, was 4 years old at the time. She cuddled up on the couch with me and she said, "Oh, Mommy, my head hurts so bad. My head just really hurts." And I said, "Oh, sweetie, what's wrong? What's wrong?" And she goes, "Mommy, there are too many minds in my head." And I said, "What? Too many minds in your head?" "Oh, Mommy, one mind is excited about moving, and one mind is scared to move, and one mind is wondering what'll happen to my old friends, and the other mind is saying, will I ever find new friends? And one mind is saying, what kind of house will we live in, and what will it be like?" And my head hurts. Would this be the right move for our family? I was scared and unsure. What were we thinking? We couldn't possibly move. We didn't know what was in store for us in Seward, Alaska, but God did. And then, those of you who know me, and you can obviously tell now, I babble a lot. And I started babbling to my husband. I was very nervous and worrying. And I said, and then on a side note, there's a reason we're not supposed to worry. You know, God tells us, leave our worries at his feet. Don't bother worrying about things. But I was doing it anyway. We couldn't possibly move. I've lived here 13 years, and I've never seen the buffalo. That's not fair. My husband had seen it. He had gone around with fishermen, and he'd seen them from the boats. But I had never seen them. They were on the other side of the mountains. Now, buffalo were not new to me. I grew up in North Dakota, for heaven's sakes, seen lots of buffalo, but not on the Aleutian Islands. And most of Alaska doesn't know there's buffalo out there. And the very next day, my husband Roger, who most of you have never got to meet, he didn't break rules. He was not a rule breaker, but he went running down the hall to my classroom. It was noon. I was getting my kids ready for lunch. We were going to the multipurpose room, and he said, "Grab those kids and run. You have got to see this. You've got to see this." And I went running out with my kids down the hall. And there, all the kids in the school were lined up against the multipurpose room windows. And if you've ever seen a shaft of light come through dark clouds, a shaft come down, on the ocean, it's spectacular, and we would see it a lot. You don't see it much around here because you have too many trees, but there were no trees in the Aleutians. And there on the second cliff, or the second bluff over there, was a shaft of light coming down on 2 buffalo. They had never crossed it. It had been over 30 or 40 years since anyone from town had ever seen the buffalo cross the mountains and come to the other side. There were 2. They were there for a day, and you never saw them again. They were, to my knowledge, they haven't been back, but there they were, the buffalo that I had never seen. I can't even tell you how shocked I was. Whoa. And then the new principal called about housing, and could somebody fly in and drive down to Seward and check out a couple of places that he might have reserved for us if someone would come and look at them. And of course, I started babbling to Roger again about wanting a blue kitchen. We had built a house out there many years ago, and in the early 80s, and it had a blue kitchen. And then several years later, decided to rent it out, and so we could leave when we needed to. And the house that I was living in at that time had a green kitchen, and I wanted a blue kitchen again. And blah, 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 blah. Roger had Region 1 meetings in Anchorage, and he flew in, drove down to Seward. He looked at 2 houses. Both of the houses had cobalt blue kitchens. And one was in the country, The stipulation was it came with a Tennessee Walker horse that someone had to take care of for a whole year because it was just a year rental. Whoa, guess which one we chose? We had a very happy two little girls, and our daughter had turned 10 that year, so our oldest one. So that house happened to be right down the road from the Carr family. The Carr family was also just moving to Seward. We all had kids near the same age, and those friendships are still going strong. They've been bridesmaid at each other's weddings, and and the Carrs have been down here many times to Deerwood to visit. So let's reflect for a minute at God's work at hand here. A job fair in Soldotna that has never happened before. I don't know if they've had any since, but that was their first one. And the volcano that erupted, but we got through it anyway. A friend in Cooper Landing telling us about the job fair. A first grade opening for me at the last minute. Buffalo on the hillside on the next ridge by the school. A nice house 4 miles out of town with a cobalt blue kitchen. A horse to take care of for a year in answer to a 10-year-old girl's prayers. A small, wonderful Lutheran church in need of a pianist and a choir director. On the road system, so we wouldn't have to fly as much anymore, or at least a lot less. Incidentally, my husband flew to every single basketball game, volleyball game, cross-country running, everything out in the Aleutians. That's how you got around, is flying. And wonderful lifelong friends, many who, again, I'll state, have been here to visit and know this area. Most of the occurrences were not specifically prayed for. Some were, but most were just thoughts, wishes, hopes, desires of the heart, or in many cases, just plain babbling. Were they earth-shaking? No. 6 o'clock newsworthy? No. Miracles? Probably not. Some might say coincidences or even luck, but not in my book. For me, they were profound. God's plan for me at work? Absolutely. Does God listen? You bet he does. Even when you're not exactly praying, even when you're just babbling. He's there. He's all-seeing, all-hearing, all-knowing, all-powerful, omnipotent. Who else could line up buffaloes and blue kitchens? Let us pray. Lord, thank you for always being there, listening, watching, and caring. Thank you for giving us glimpses of your love and your plans for us, for you are in control. Help us to notice those signs, those little crumbs in our path showing us the way, those signs that mean something to only us, your little reminders that we are in your care and that you have a plan for us, that we are part of your master plan. Help us to notice the many, many ordinary miracles happening every day.